Welcome to my off-grid adventures. I'm Frank, this is my puppy Pumpkin, and we're glad that you're here with us today at our 60-acre off-grid Michigan property because we just finished today actually building this backstop shooting range for shooting handguns, rifles, air guns, and just about anything that we can throw at it. It worked out really well, and I want to share with you the steps that we took from the planning, the building materials, the cost, and the first use, and talk about how it worked out.
Let's cut to the chase about some of the details that you might be most interested in. What did this cost? How long did it take? And how hard was it to build? It cost $620. It only took about 5 hours to complete, and I was able to do it all by myself. It was a satisfying and a fun project to work on. Once I had the plan in place, everything went together very smoothly. The most difficult part was the final step of securing wire rope to cinch the front posts together to keep it from bowing outward. But even that wasn't too bad. Research and planning were the first steps. I had to decide what style of backstop to build, what materials to use, and how large it should be. So I did what you might be doing right now. I went online to gather some ideas. I knew I wanted something relatively small and manageable because we'd only be having 2, 3, or maybe 4 people shooting at a time. And I didn't have a big budget, so this also had to be reasonable. But I didn't want to do this twice, so it needed to work and it needed to last. Most of the examples I found online involved railroad ties. That sounds smart because they stay in place with spikes and they'd hold up for a long time, but they aren't readily available in my area. I don't have a trailer to haul them with, and they weigh upwards of 200 pounds apiece, so it just sounded like difficult material to work with. I had to do this by myself, so lifting 200-pound boards just wasn't going to happen. After considering a few different approaches, I landed on a combination of some of the best things that I saw others do in YouTube videos like this one. I'll start by explaining the layout and structure of this, and then I'll go over the parts that were used. To get the most use out of a small range, I wanted it to angle outward in the front. That way more people could participate in a line of shooters and each would have enough space for their target. I was going to use a V shape, but I needed the back to be flat for the tractor's bucket to fit as far back as possible when filling it with sand. I wanted it to be 6 foot high so there would be plenty of room for shooting from a bench, and I also wanted it to be high to catch any rogue shots from inexperienced shooters. Once I knew the general shape, I had to decide on the materials. First I thought of using 3/4 inch 4x8 sheets of plywood. That seemed like it would be the simplest for the project itself, but the downside is that if the wood were to rot, and I'm sure it will over time, I'd have to replace the whole sheet, and that would mean starting over on rebuilding this backstop. Then I thought of using deck boards because they're cheap, they're light, and when a board breaks or rots, I can replace it one at a time. However, upon further research, 2x6 boards are the same price as deck boards, and they're much thicker. Even though they'd be heavier to handle, I went with that. I knew I wanted to cement 4 4x4 inch posts to brace everything together, 2 in the back and 2 up front, but I had to decide if the 2x6 board should go on the inside or the outside of that 4x4 post frame. The backstop would be a little stronger if the horizontal boards were on the inside of the posts, but after it was filled with sand, I wouldn't be able to remove those horizontal boards and replace them as they got rotten or broken. So I decided to place the 2x6 boards on the outside of the vertical 4x4s. And that's the same reason why I went with screws instead of nails. I needed to be able to easily remove the boards in the future. I knew that after sand was placed into this backstop, it would apply pressure to the front 2 posts, causing them to bow outward. So I needed something that would tie them together and hold them in place. I ended up going with 1/8 inch wire rope and a screw eye. Next I had to choose a location. I already had a shaded canopy near our pole barn, so I decided to repurpose it as a shooting bench. It's covered, and I recently added 2 curtain rods and curtains so that it could be shaded at any point during the day. I wanted the range to run parallel with the barn, with the backstop backed up against the tree line far enough back so that it didn't block access to the tent shed that's behind the pole barn. This turned out to be 15 yards, which is great for pellet guns and 22s, and if we want to shoot a long-range rifle, we can always step back and shoot from the other edge of the property. By the way, this canopy was very easy to set up using a kit from Beaver that we bought on Amazon. I'll put a link to that in the description. That covers the planning stage. Now let's start with the project itself. The first thing I had to do was drill post holes for the back wall section. Although the boards are 8 feet long, I knew that I wanted the posts to be 6 feet apart. That way, the 1 foot overlapping area on each end would serve two purposes. It would give me a solid backing to line up each sidewall board so that they were flush with each other without having to maneuver it into place. And it would give the sidewalls a little bit more structural support. I have a Ryobi 40-volt battery-powered earth auger that does a great job with projects like this. I don't have to fiddle with gas or oil, it's quiet, and one battery will dig well over 20 holes. After digging the 2 holes for the back post, I dropped those boards in and eyeballed them to see if they were level with each other. I had to do a little more work to get the left side to match the right.
Whew, that's gross stuff.
After filling each hole with Quikrete, I leveled them and added a little water. I could have waited overnight, maybe I should have waited overnight so that the cement would cure before building the wall, but I figured it'd be fine to proceed as long as I kept double checking things to make sure it was still level, and if there was a problem I could always brace it in the right position with boards. That wasn't necessary. In my instance, it was fine to just keep going with the project. One nice thing about the plans for this backstop is that it doesn't require any cutting of boards. I just stacked each board on top of the other and drilled 2 4-inch screws into each side. The first one took a little bit more time because I had to make sure it was level, but the rest went up very fast and easy. I varied between setting 2, 3, or 4 boards up at a time, stacking them on top of each other before drilling any holes. And I know that was a little bit risky. They could have fallen down, but they didn't. It turned out fine.
Heidi ho, neighbor Tim. For those of you who remember Home Improvement, just couldn't resist. Last board for the back wall. Wanted this to be 6 feet. Wow, look how close I eyeballed the height of each of these. That is almost perfect. Look at the spacing between. I think it is perfect. I did that by eyeball.
I decided to call it a day and tackle the sidewalls in the morning. First, I needed to decide where to place the front post holes. Once again, I eyeballed the location, trying to get the front to be about 10 to 12 feet apart from each other, and that worked out very well. I didn't want the front posts to be at the very edge of the sidewalls, so I planned for them to be about 1 foot back, and that would give more support to the sidewalls, and it would give me a solid anchor point for the wire rope. After doing my best to get the front posts level with each other and with the back posts, I dropped in the Quikrete again, leveled them, and added water. Since the 2 posts for the back wall did fine without waiting overnight for the cement to cure, I decided it'd be safe to keep going with the side walls before this cement cured as well, and it worked fine. The first board is the most important one to get lined up. Again, this time it had to be lined up with the bottom board of the back wall, and it had to be level, and then the rest would go up very quickly. This part of the project, these 2 sidewalls, was the easiest and the most fun to complete. It was just satisfying to get these boards up and see this come together. But I did soon realize I was going to run out of screws. I had a 2-pound box of 4-inch screws, and that just wasn't enough. So I placed 1 screw in each side of each board, and I ended up with just 2 screws left. Time to order more from Amazon. It'll be here overnight, and I can tackle this again tomorrow. The sand was scheduled to be delivered at 3:30 in the afternoon, but I've used this company a couple times already, and they were early both times. So as soon as the screws arrived, I quickly finished that part of the job. And sure enough, the sand arrived an hour earlier than expected, but we were ready. I wasn't sure exactly where they'd be able to dump the sand, but since the back gate swings open as it dumps out the sand, it wasn't possible to put this right into the backstop. Thankfully, I have a tractor with a bucket, and I love anytime I get some more seat time, so this was a lot of fun as well. And Pumpkin always loves riding in the tractor with me. It's hard to gauge how much sand you need. There are calculators online and they do help, but I wasn't building a perfect cube of sand. I knew it was going to be a mound. So I took my best estimate and I went with 10 yards for the backstop and an additional 2 for the sandbox. I didn't want to have to order another delivery and I didn't want a bunch of extra sand either, and this ended up being perfect for the job. Yes, I could have gone with 8 or 9 yards, but this was fine for me, and I'm glad to have the full 10 yards. It took a while to figure out the best way to move the sand into the backstop with the tractor. The pile of sand was in the way, so the first step was to clear a path through it. Then I just chipped away at it bit by bit until I was able to move that sand over into the backstop. By the way, if I had planned for anything taller, wider, or deeper, I don't think I could have done this with my tractor. It wouldn't have been safe to lift or push sand higher than 6 feet with my 3033R John Deere. Now for the most challenging part. I knew I couldn't install the wire rope until after the sand was in place because it would get in the way of the tractor bucket. So I knew I was going to have to put that in while it was under the pressure of the sand. My hope was that a turnbuckle would draw the front post back together, but there were 2 problems with this. The turnbuckle in the kit I purchased was too small for the job, and the weight of the sand was going to make it impossible for any size turnbuckle to return the front post to their original position. At this point, I realized that the wire rope was still necessary, but instead of cinching the posts back to a 90-degree angle, they were going to serve the purpose of keeping them from bowing out any further. I fumbled around with a couple ways of attaching this, and I ended up looping one end around the left post, and then I pushed the right wall closer to the center with the side of the tractor bucket, and used a large screw eye into that right post, and as I tightened it, it cinched the 2 posts together just a little bit. For this part of the project, it's vital to have the right supplies, and I'm glad that I had thought ahead and ordered these so that they were there for me to use before this bowed out any further and possibly even broke or snapped. I purchased the wire rope as a kit with all of the necessary parts, and then I bought a set of 2 tools, a wire rope cutter and a crimping tool. This would have been impossible without them. I don't believe I could have cut the wire rope with just a standard cable wire cutter that you might use for household electrical wire. I didn't factor these 2 things into the cost of the project because you might already have these tools, just like I didn't factor in the cost of the Ryobi earth auger or the John Deere tractor. But if you're curious, the rope kit was $40 and the tool kit was $50. It's always a special thing when 3 generations get to shoot together. My son, myself, and my dad shot a few different guns, including a 9mm and 3 different .22 caliber handguns. After shooting hundreds of rounds, I checked the back wall, and no bullets had gone through. I didn't think they would, or that they even could, but I wanted to check just to be sure.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more content about living off-grid in Michigan, please subscribe. We'd love to have you join us. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.